Three. Hi, my name's Alyssa. I am the host of Stories and Spoilers, the podcast. And in this spooky, brilliant episode, I'm here with Erika T. Wurth, who is the author of White Horse. You may also know her from her newest haunting story, The Haunting of Room 904. Without further ado, this is Erika. Erika, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored.
I am so happy to have you here. Before we start, can you please tell them a little bit about you, what got you into writing, and about The Haunting of Room 904?
Yeah, so I guess, I'm Erika T. Wurth, right? I'm the author of White Horse and the Haunting of Room 904. And the highlights, from my career, White Horse was, it was a Target Book of the Month, a New York editor's pick, and I was a Good Morning America, and I was like, on the billboard, right, which is just like this wild moment as an author to see that kind of thing. I wish I'd been in New York for that moment. I'm also a creative writing professor of many, many years. So I do that. I'm Dr. Erika T. Wurth, right? I did a doctorate at the University of Colorado Boulder in creative writing and literature, and I've been teaching creative writing ever since. And The Haunting of Room 904, it's as you know, it's my newest, as you said, and basically the log line, and it's kind of a complicated book, right? So I'm always careful that when I give the log line, it's not too much. But basically, it's about a woman who has, she's a PhD, she's getting her PhD in psychology. Her sister and her mother are always kind of into, haunted things. And I think they see ghosts. And the main character, Olivia, is like, oh, that's ridiculous. And, but when her, sister, who's had issues with drugs and she's gotten involved in this cult, they don't even realize how serious the cult is. She calls her the night that she's graduating with her PhD and says, if you don't come to the Brown Palace, which is a historic, hotel in Denver, I'm going to die. And the main character's like, look, I'm drunk. Just, you're crazy. Just come on over, like come over and hang out. And so she wakes up to a vision of her sister's ghost. And this sort of turns on her paranormal powers, and she's unable to be an academic. When she decides, I guess I'm just going to use this. And she and her best friend Alejandro decide like he has HIV, he needs insurance, for his meds. She's like, you know what? I'm going to employ him. We're going to be paranormal detectives. And 5 years later, the Brown House calls her and says, you know what? Every 5 years, a woman in 904 dies just where your sister did. And so we want you to solve this crime. And by the way, your sister's now haunting 904. And the main character says, absolutely not. And then her mother checks in, reappears in 904, and she knows she has 3 weeks to solve this paranormal crime or her mother will die. So
That is a perfect description of your book. When I first read the first chapter, I was sucked in. Obviously, as a creative writing professor and amazing educator, I was curious what inspired you to write this story.
yeah, I think you were talking, and sorry, I actually forgot to talk about that aspect. Yeah, as a kid, I was a super nerdy kid. If a book didn't involve a dragon, a ghost, or an elf, I wasn't interested. And then, especially at the time, I went to PhD school, and that was just like not cool. Like, literary realism was the only thing, and I desperately wanted to be taken seriously. So I did that for a long time, and I missed the ghosts and I missed the dragons, right? So I kind of ended up coming back and writing horror because horror, like, it still allowed me to approach the darker stuff and yet,
Mm.
get all these cool things like supernatural, like monsters and ghosts and haunted mirrors and portals. But the haunting of Room 904, more specifically, I was thinking about how, the Brown Palace, which is just like the White Horse. White Horse is a dive bar. It's an Indian bar in Denver that closed during the pandemic. There are real cats jumping on the counter, right? It was kind of, that's all very real. And then the Brown Palace is this, totally different situation. It's this beautiful, opulent hotel with a, cool bar in it. And it was being constructed, I believe, in the late 1800s. And it was this, evidence that Denver is becoming a real city, right? It can be this place where you can like go to this amazing hotel and this amazing bar and be served in this way that you would be served right in New York. But at the same time, in not too many miles, I guess it would be west of the Brown Palace, the Sand Creek Massacre was occurring, which, if you've read up on it, is one of the most brutal things you could imagine happening to Native people. And I grew up not far from it. My cousin, like I said, he's an enrolled member of the Cheyenne Arapaho Nation in Oklahoma. And, so he had ancestors whose relatives died there. And so for me, even though my main character is not Cheyenne Arapaho, it was important for me to talk about this thing that like I grew up near, that I was influenced by, and show that like right at the same time these two things were happening, right? This deeply and uncivilized thing while this very civilized thing was happening. So yeah.
I think also the element in the story that I thought was really cool was the mixed media, how you reference certain elements in the story along with historical elements such as the massacre. You also discuss grief. You discuss a very abusive relationship. I will not spoil it, but it is referenced in your story. There's so many really complex points in this book, but I felt like the heart of it truly was the sisterhood and this sense of grief and this sense of like, I will avenge you, I will find you. And I was curious how you kind of developed the main character and how you also created her story. We kind of learn about her sister backwards. We get to hear about her sister through like little elements of other people, what they reference. How did you come up with that? Because that was really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, and that's the thing. How do you construct a character? And I did two characters, right? And even three if you count the father, that are dead, but you want to make like, and but they're ghosts, right? So you get this opportunity. And how do you make it not cheesy? How do you make it so they're still complex, rounded characters all on their own, and they're not just, placeholders so the main character can show what a good person they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's the testament. Like one of the things, like you hope you do as a writer if you're doing it well, is you're able to make well-rounded characters all the way around, right? And I definitely had some inspiration from real life because like the main character, I'm somebody who grew up with a sibling, and I had to feel, for very different reasons, a tremendous amount of grief around my sibling. And so like I think in ways 904 was my way of processing that. So yeah.
Mm. There also is a character in your story who is two spirited, and they are referenced in a spiritual sense in the story. And I was wondering what inspired that element, as well as the ghosts and the entities in your story.
I think that, earlier when, we're chatting about Stephen King, I also read like so much Stephen King as a kid. And, I don't know, he seems like a fair-minded guy. Like maybe now he'd be like, yeah, whoops, shouldn't have done that. Wouldn't do it now. Like I could see that. But unfortunately, as you said, like at the time when I was reading King, and look, he's just an easy one to pick on. It's really everybody, right? You have natives who are savage, they're very, one-dimensional. You have black characters who either die off, like you said, or they're very much what people call like the magical Negro. They're just like, and they're
They're
good
only
in a
there to
way.
help the white main character. Usually.
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
they're only there to
Right.
help the white main character, or they're a side character, or they get killed in the beginning or the end. Like,
I
yeah.
would say the Dark Tower series is some kind of exception to that, but at the same time, the black character in there, she's well-rounded, but she's also just absurdly like comedically is the wrong word because it's so awful, but absurdly racist in other ways, like the depiction of her. And I think King thought, well, I'm just going to write this character who sounds like she sounds, and I get that maybe he was thinking that, but it didn't. It doesn't. How do they say? It doesn't age well, right? And so for me, I think niece. I wanted to have a depiction of a character who's two spirit, who was two spirit back in the day, right? Before really, like, you know before colonization entirely took its toll, right? Because I don't think that people, I'm not sure there's much representation of that at all. And I
Mm.
wanted niece to be, and I wanted niece to be angry, and I did tireless research into the language, because the particular band that was attacked at Sand Creek, they have their own specific name. They're a blend of the Cheyenne and Arapaho. They're not just one or the other, like they're one particular band. And so they spoke their own language, that had their own ways and had their own thing. And so Nice, I wanted him to be as well rounded or I'm sorry, them, actually, I'm messing up the pronouns of my own character. I wanted them to be as well rounded as they possibly could. Because, I think we have this kind of, even natives sometimes have this, you know, purest notion of how we used to be. And I think
Mm.
what I wanted to show was like a human being at that time, and maybe try to think about, all right, what was the way that they saw the world and what we would call heaven? It wasn't exactly the same. There were all kinds of different words and different ways in which they perceived their spiritual lives, their material lives. And what would happen if you were a spiritual person and you saw genocide coming, first for your people and then, for the larger group of Native people, like what would that do to you? And I like that he was like, or they were like, I will just haunt this person for the rest of their lives and their ancestors. So yeah.
I will say that yes, like the item that as a reader you do discover that this spirit is connected to, and the
Right.
sounds coming out of this item in the audiobook was so haunting. And then when you find out who is in this item that is being haunted, it's heartbreaking. And
Yes.
the way that you intertwined horror and grief and this sense of like doom, I couldn't, it was like claustrophobic until you were able to have this like moment of brevity. The main character's best friend for me, love him down. I Every single time she would go do something, like the main character would go do something that was like not super safe or kind of shady, he would be like, where are you going? No, he'd be like, I don't want to do that, absolutely not. But there was a line referenced in your book that was one of my favorite lines in the story, which was, we have no future, you must give her the key. Listeners, I will not be spoiling this book, so don't be scared. But that is like a little taste of this story, which is like, what do you mean key? What do you mean no future? What is with the ghosts in the room? Why are women always dying in this room? And even like the mom character, I felt this sense of like care for her. I deeply cared for her. And even though she wasn't the main character, I was like, protect her at all costs. I don't know why. But in my mind, I just imagined her as this like 5'1", curvy, like in her little like sweater, like almost librarian-esque. Like that's kind of how I imagined the mom. So I just imagined
Yeah,
her
yeah.
going into the hotel and being like, I'm gonna get answers, damn it. And as readers, as you will find out, answers come at a cost. And the more people that the main character and the mom and everyone begins to investigate what happened to her sister, the deeper the hole gets. And the cult as well. I want to ask you about that. There is a cult at the heart of this story, The Haunting of Room 904. What inspired this like supernatural cult for you? Because it was really interesting when you threw that in. It's pretty important to the story.
Yeah, I would say super quickly as to the mom. So she's a journalist, right? And so not that every native character has to be like a one example of the race, right? Like I always think that's a little destructive too. Like native people can suck, native people can be complicated, they can be lots of things, and they're still human beings, right? But I did kind of want to show a lot of native women who are really accomplished. Mom's a journalist. Victoria she's a Mensa member. She's so intelligent. She's just bored. Like she's like, I'll just be a real estate agent so I can make lots of money. And then, I'll be free to like do things that my brain wants to do. But she's constantly bored because she's a literal genius, right? And I think a lot of Dene people, like a lot of their irritation that I grew up with them, Navajo Dene, is like, you know what I mean? Like we're not all on the res and we're
Mm-hmm.
not, and even if we are, we're not all these simplistic, sweetsy characters. And even if I am a weaver, maybe I'm queer or, like, so I wanted Victoria to be this like very funny, sharp Mensa member to like kind of work against that so that I could show the kind of Navajo or Diné people I know, right? So that's what I want to do with all of these characters. As to the cult, I don't even remember when that came in. I think what it came down to is there are all of these dark academia elements, even if it's not entirely a dark academia book, right? Like the main character has a PhD, but it doesn't take place in an institution of higher learning. So I don't know if it
Mm-hmm.
would be dark academia. But I wanted like all of these kind of like fun gothic elements, like cults, like spells, right? All
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of things. I just get a kick out of, right? People who wear velvet a lot, like that I just kind of get a kick out of.
Honestly,
I want it to be
yes.
atmospheric for that reason. So yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think also like there was a machine they used to hear the spirits.
Right.
And oh, there's something about listening to the audiobook. I highly recommend it. Also get a physical copy because if you do like listen and you read at the same time, the sounds as they're trying to investigate like what spirit this is. The main character's best friend is like right beside her, and he's like, "What are you seeing?" Like, there's just such a oh, like the pacing is so like bone chilling. It gave the same sensations as when you're growing up and you read like Goosebumps. Those chapters for me were like, "Oh, this is spooky." I was like, "Don't go in there." It was very much giving like True Blood, like "Sokia, don't go in there." It was giving that energy. Even the cult leader who before the episode began we were discussing, I imagined is like Ben Barnes. For listeners out there who are
I
like visual folks, I imagined the cult leader as Ben Barnes, this like 5 o'clock shadow, button down shirt, like, I remember your sister and I remember what she gave up for us, and I remember he had to be like pulling you in. And I just loved it. I also imagined Kate Blanchett. There is a female character in the story who was involved with the cult in passing. And she's this
Right.
like
Oh yeah. Yes.
previously glamorous, kind of sexy, like withdrawn. I imagined Kate Blanchett from Titanic, because I was like, I need her to be like old Hollywood, like sexy, beautiful, but like
Yeah.
jaded. I
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
her to have like, I need her to feel guilty about something that happens in the story.
Right.
I imagined
Yeah.
everything in my mind reading The Haunting of Room 904 like a film. Because it was so visceral. I was like, oh, this is spooky.
Well,
There's even
from
if you're
your
scared of mirrors, read this book because there are some spooky moments in the mirror. Brother. No.
from your mouth to Hollywood's ears, I actually would love to sell it. For a while there, I was represented by Sugar 28, and they were trying to sell it as a series. And from what I'm hearing, it's just here's what I'll tell you. And I suppose I can also get back to the cult thing, and I give you a more concrete, satisfying answer.
Ooh.
But I think they kept saying, "Oh, no one's taking new IP, no one's taking horror," and every when she was saying that, every single one of my white male peers in horror were getting Hollywood deals. Literally every single one. Literally,
Wow.
when I went to Comic Con, I was surrounded by set pieces that people could go into that were my male peers' books being turned into series or movies, right? Literally, I was physically surrounded by their stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love these guys. They deserve everything they're getting. But it would be nice to see at least Rachel Harrison, who is a white writer, but a woman and a ridiculously talented writer, at least her work, like, equal. As the cult thing, in some ways, I think, like there was a lot going into it, but I think it's because in some, like, America has highly ritualized ways in which they think about indigenous people. And we're sort of integrated into its spiritual life in a strange and creepy way. And so it's almost like I wanted to see it. Like, again, there's all these fun aspects, right? Like, kind of, I thought about, like, what if the brown pals, considering how old it is, because it certainly could be, right? It's on a natural spring. Like, when I drank the water in when I was staying there, I was like, this is like the water where I grew up, and it is on a natural spring. So what if it were on sacred territory,
Ooh.
and this very bloody history that has taken place everywhere, it's certainly in Denver and certainly outlying areas, like, it was because originally, right, there was this sacred space and they were
Mm.
capitalizing on it in the same way they've done everything for Native people, right? Like, take our bodies, take our land, take everything, and then create this highly ritualized thing to suck even the rest of it out, right? Like, can we use these Native people, the ones that are left, and their spirituality and their connection to these other worlds to have ultimate power, you know? So yeah.
Wow. That is fucking badass. Pardon my French. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, the way that, and without spoiling it, the way that The Haunting of Room 904 plus White Horse, these two books felt like sisters in a way.
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
different storylines, y'all. They're different stories, but they complement each other in this way where it's like you take tragedies and you give like a paranormal essence to it where it becomes this like, and what would you do to get revenge,
right.
and what would you do, like what's waiting in the shadows, and what in history, who wrote history, who, there's something about your writing that leaves these questions that are haunting, so much so that the entities that are in the story, you care for them, um and you feel for them, and you realize the humans are spookier than the entities at times,
Absolutely.
personally.
So that you know, someone told me that the Sand Creek Massacre site right now, the Trump administration has put up a sign saying, if you hear anti-American things, you report to this phone number. So this stuff is sorry, I'm in suburbia, so there's always a lawnmower eventually. Um, God, they're the most annoying suburban noises in the world. Anyway, so yeah, that is up there right now. So there is a reconstruction of history. I'm like, why do we have to make this a nice thing? Like, so what is it? What is so unbearable about having to face, hey, okay, these bad things happen. Let's acknowledge them so that all of us can kind of figure out, okay, how do we fix now? Like why
Mm,
is that so? I just feel like it's Americans, we've spent so many generations, right? Even those of us who've been kind of crapped upon, like having at least roads we can drive on. And so we just don't understand how much has been done that's violent and terrible. And then on top of that, been done for us so we don't have to look at it. And it's obviously really destructive. So yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I I think it's one of those things where I didn't mention it on the podcast, but I do want to mention it now. Your book White Horse was deeply impactful to me, and it helped me find authors like Rachel Harris. And I just finished your book Cackle, actually. It helped me so good. I'm plowing through her books. Your writing also helps me find Aaron E. Adams, who wrote Jackal. Like, your book kind of helped me dip my toe and then eventually dive into the genre of horror, but written by women, and the importance of that. Um, so I just wanted to say how powerful your work is to me, and I know how powerful it is to so many people. And in an era of a lot of fear, in an era of a lot of anxiety and stress, your books are
Yeah.
almost like a spooky haunted house you can like snuggle up in for a bit. And you may hear creaks here and there, and you may see a ghost. But as long as you didn't do some shady ass shit, you should be fine. So it's just mind your business and you'll be fine.
I
um
love that. Well,
yeah,
thank you.
your
I
books are like
like
a
that.
cozy haunted house in the best way. As long as you're not racist or horrible, you'll be fine. So it's just the bar is in hell. But I wanted to say how much I cannot wait to read your next book. And as we close out on this episode, can you tell me a little bit more about your book in the future?
Absolutely. Like we talked a little bit before, I've signed with a new agent, Mark Gottlieb at Trident. He is just a killer and also just a sweet guy to boot. I really like him, and so I'm kind of in the midst of writing this thing right now. And it's slow going for a couple of reasons, but it's going. And it's about a woman who she saw something supernatural with her auntie on a walk when she was a kid. She saw what Apaches call Gan or a little person, and
Mm.
it changed both of their lives. Like the auntie then just goes on a tear, like she's going to find it again, or she's going to find Bigfoot, or she's going to find ghosts, because now she sees there is something magical in this world. And the main character
Mm.
like processes this. But what happens is the auntie ends up in Appalachia and then disappearing, right, in this sort of trail of things. So the main character decides, I'm going to do my PhD in anthropology, but it's also going to be kind of covertly about, can I go to this community that is more Black and Indigenous in Appalachia, that where my family's from way back when, and interview them and see if there's any veracity to some of these claims. So she goes and she lives in this cabin in the middle of the woods. She's interviewing this woman named Ruby Nab, and she's haunted almost immediately by this figure that is well known in Appalachia called the Old Woman. And the old woman's really scary. She has like a knife for a finger. It's a whole thing. And Ruby tells her, like, oh man, I don't know how you drew her attention, but you've got to go to this cabin in the woods and you can't always find it. I can't even tell you exactly how to get to it, but I can tell you how to try. And once you go in it, there'll be a mirror, and you have to do this particular ceremony, or this old woman will haunt you until either you're dead or insane. So she decides, okay, I'm going to do it. And then the old woman appears and pushes her into the mirror. And she ends up, and that's why I'm going into a more SFF kind of territory, which you see a little
Ooh.
bit in my early work. She ends up in an alternative America where genocide never occurred, but every Native person has these magical powers. And they're being
Ooh.
used by the Americans to like buy this giant AI supercomputer so that the Americans are even more powerful than they are now. So they have like advanced technology. They're like the most oppressive superpower in the world you can imagine, and they use Native people to do this. And at the same time, this giant super AI plans to eliminate Native people in every single world, align all the world so it can be like a universal destructive power. So the main character's journey is, how can she help them not do this? And so she pops in and out of our world, and then she finds out what the old woman has to do with this. I was going to make it a series, but all of my friends warned me. They're like, "Do not do it. Do a standalone." Oh my god! So what I'm going to do is like introduce it, still make it paranormal, right? And with the idea that maybe if it really goes, like it'll turn into a series at some point. So yeah.
Oh my God, that sounds absolutely amazing. I cannot wait for that to come out. Where can everyone find you? Where can they find your books?
I would say I'm most on Instagram and these days TikTok. And I make my videos right on the TikTok and on the Instagram. But I'm just ErikaTWurth, everywhere. Like I just made it really universal. So Facebook is your thing. I'm still there. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm really not on Twitter. I just keep it just so no one can cannibalize the account. But mainly TikTok and Instagram is where I am.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Erika. You are amazing. Everyone, please check out The Haunting of Room 904. Check out White Horse and keep your eye out for her newest book because when it does come out in the future, y'all don't fall through any mirrors, okay? Because it's going to be really, really good. Erika, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was a blast. So fun.
Yes.
You're so cool.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm like so happy to see you. And everyone, please like this on YouTube, subscribe, leave a nice little comment if you can. And please check out Erika's books. Erika T. Wurth. You can find her books where they are sold. Keep an eye out and have an absolutely wonderful day.